All right, Chaz, let's get right to it. The bottom line from that series in St. Louis is the Reds got beat 2 out of 3 by the Cardinals. They still have to have some success against division teams, and now they won't see a division team again until August. But there were some lasting images from those games at Busch Stadium in St. Louis. Ellie De La Cruz pukes on the field, drops to a knee on the outfield grass in the middle of a game, stays in, and then hits what could have been a game-deciding homer his next time up. Matt McLain seems to be back to being Matt McLain. The hits kept coming in St. Louis, and McLain moves back to the 2 spot in the order after the Reds very patiently and confidently waited for McLain to find his game. And Andrew Abbott put down 18 straight Cardinals to finish off a scorching 7 innings. And now you have teammates not only openly campaigning to get Abbott to the All-Star game, Jose Trevino is campaigning for Abbott to start the All-Star game. They lost the series, Chaz. So why does it feel like and sound like they still might be on the cusp of something?
Well, the Reds lost the series, but the parallels between the Reds entering this week's series against the Yankees are actually staggeringly similar to how it felt entering the Dodgers series in 2023. Some series predating it where the Reds had been playing their best baseball and kind of dragging themselves out of the muck, kind of into the mix, introducing themselves onto the stage for a first time. Then an important division series in 2023, it was the Brewers, where the Reds, they beat themselves in some frustrating games, kind of similar to how Saturday and to an extent Friday too felt against the Cardinals this season. The finale of the Brewers series in 23 and the Cardinals series this weekend was a spectacular start by Andrew Abbott. Now one of the game's premier, blue blood programs coming to town, a superstar prospect making his debut, the team being in a spot where it's like, all right, we're playing our best ball. This is a good time for us to be facing this big team. And probably some unbelievable crowds coming to Great American Ballpark this weekend. This has the potential, the Reds have to do it, but to be the type of catapult series for a belief and a proof of concept, this series has the potential to be that, just like the 2023 Dodgers series was a couple years ago.
So you're suggesting history has a chance to repeat itself at Great American Ballpark. We've said for weeks the Reds, they have to make a run. So now they've won 10 of 15 games. They've won 4 of 5 series. But what you're describing is starting at Great American Ballpark this week. They have a gauntlet of games in the next few weeks that could go a long way in, kind of writing the story for the first half of this season for this ball club. Welcome to Power Stacks, proud members of the Growler Podcast Network. Coming up on the show this week, Chaz, the chase is on. Say hello to the Reds' top prospect as he'll be greeted at Great American Ballpark by Aaron Judge and one of the best teams in baseball. Also, the former first-round pick who is a sneaky part of the story of how the Reds landed Chase Burns. And we're not on the iPads. We're dialed into the game. The standing order that has taken over the Reds' dugout at this point in the season. All that's on the way, but right now the leadoff spot. And Chaz, just a few days ago, Chase Burns was in Louisville. You were in Louisville. And after the fact, as we discussed what you saw and heard that day at Slugger Field, I gave you this question about the realistic expectations for Chase Burns this season. How did we get from that conversation to Burns making his big league debut against the New York Yankees this week?
I should have just written it. It was time for the Reds to call up Chase Burns, because that's how it looked. And I kind of went through the same process that Terry Francona described talking with reporters yesterday. Francona was like, you look for all these reasons why you shouldn't call him up when you're looking at a guy who is arriving that much ahead of schedule. And sure, we talked ourselves into the innings management they want to use, the impact that could have on the bullpen, some creativity you might need to use to bake in off days. Then after they called him up yesterday, I did look at the rest of the schedule, and they can manage this pretty well, especially with Hunter Green, assuming he comes back in July, maybe shifting then to a 6-man rotation. they're going to be able to do this. And again, they have off days coming up leading into the All-Star break. So if that's not the concern, and that's the part I was overlooking, well, then I know I said this. I've said this for weeks. Chase Burns is ready to get big league outs right now. It was one of, and I said this last week too, one of the best pure prospect performances that I've seen during my 6 years doing this, right up there with Ellie, maybe even a tick above. I'll just be honest, where Hunter Green was as a prospect. That's not saying Chase Burns will be better than Hunter Green, but where he is right now, I feel like Chase Burns is better set up to succeed than any of Green, Lodolo, even Abbott. And Abbott, of course, had that incredible start. Chase Burns is so well set up to just go out and beat Chase Burns and have that be more than good enough.
Here's one thing I see about the timing in this. Obviously, the catalyst for this obviously was the plan for Wade Miley went away when Wade Miley was injured. But we just talked about some of those moments and the lasting images from the series in St. Louis. If you're the front office and you clearly see that your team is fighting, and how many times have you heard Terry Francona say they fought? I love watching them fight. They believe they can win. They fought in St. Louis. If you're the front office and you want to give this team every chance you can to win, if you believe that Chase Burns is clearly the best option right now to pitch, how can you keep him in Louisville and then still convey that same message to the big league club that we're doing everything we can now to help you win? You can't. And so we don't know where this goes, but if you're delivering that message to your team, to your fan base to a certain degree, you can't sit on him in Louisville when he's clearly the best option.
2 points on that. First, a trade just wasn't going to happen at this point in the schedule. Unless you're Rafael Devers forcing your way out of town, trades don't happen until late July, like Aaron Savali demanded a trade in Milwaukee. That's another example. But the Reds didn't need a starting pitcher at the time. Like, it was just unrealistic to expect that would be the way the Reds acquire a pitcher. The only other option was Chase Petty, who we'll talk more about later, or Brian Van Bell, who we won't be talking about on this show. Very, very similar to Rhett Lauder in 2024. It was late August. They still were kind of clinging to that playoff hope, even though it probably wasn't going to happen for that team. And David Bell at the time had a series of individual meetings with a lot of the notable players about that team, trying to, it was like, all right, how do we keep this together? How do we keep this together? Like that insular focus, that exchange, that conversation. What do we need to do to keep this on track and prevent it from spiraling? Which of course it did. The answers and that feedback wasn't the reason why the Reds called up Rhett Lauder, but it certainly didn't hurt. And a lot of the players were voicing, man, here's where we are. Here's what we need. Let's try to keep going. And then the Reds call up Rhett Lauder. Like, I don't think that was a coincidence either. Now, obviously, this is much earlier in the season, but it does feel like a similar sense of urgency to respect where this team's at, combined with Burns being more than ready for the opportunity.
You answer the questions about a player's makeup and how they handle things when you see them experience those things, react to those things, how they handle big league pressure, big league hitters, big league everything. So we don't know those answers yet. But the Reds had to do the best that they could to answer as many questions as they could about Chase Burns during the evaluation process before the draft. And we'll get to the lottery later, but just in evaluating the player, they already thought before they drafted him, and certainly have had reinforced through his 13 minor league starts, what they believe to be a player that mentally and makeup-wise or has the moxie to do this. Is that what makes them believe that? And is that the accurate assessment that the Reds have of Chase Burns as they send him out there this week?
They've had what they call the scouting department has had what they call a high follow. We're going to follow this kid highly on Chase Burns since the summer of 2020. He's been on the radar for a while. He's someone they've had a lot of feedback and perspective and information about, both interviews with Burns, both interviews around Burns throughout this process. So much so that, and we'll get to this later, but when they won the lottery, the Reds were much higher on Burns at the time than the consensus opinion was kind of around the scouting community. And that went on through the draft when A lot of us were expecting Charlie Condon, Jack Caglione, Nick Kurtz, and the Reds go out and take the pitch from Wake Forest. The consistency of Burns and just the perspective and demeanor and the difference between who he is on the field and off the field made such a big impact on why they love him so much. Here's Reds scouting director Joe Katuska. He's their draft guy, about the interview process and what he learned about Chase Burns that was so important in their decision to take him last summer.
When you watch him on the mound, he is so competitive, and like you can see the adrenaline's really pumping when he's out there on the mound pitching. And when you talk to him off the field, he is extremely mild-mannered and thoughtful and logical with all the things that he is talking about. Particularly in discussing that decision to go from Tennessee to Wake Forest. Laying that all out for us, what his reasons were for making that move, and seeing how that lined up with what he actually put into play in the spring. It was really impressive. And that, so we met with them, like I said, in November, and then we brought him back in before the draft for another interview with a little different group of people. And that, that really came through both times. You watch him out there, and he's going at 100% when he's pitching. But it's a different guy off the mound completely, where he's able to flip the switch when he gets in between the white lines.
And it's a good reminder, because obviously the biggest reason he was drafted was because of that wipeout slider and 100-mile-an-hour fastball and all that kind of stuff. But a huge part of the evaluation is sometimes, all right, we call you up to face the Yankees. Good luck, kid. Can you handle it? Like, that stuff really does it's about to make a difference on Tuesday, one way or another. And there's no number, there's no analytic formula. You can run a prospect through to figure out if they've got it or not. And that's something I know this for a fact. Something Joe spends a ton of time on. The Reds spend a ton of time and energy on kind of the off-field makeup of the person. When the Reds scout in Latin America, they put a huge emphasis on that. That helps them find workers like Ellie De La Cruz. Like, that's a real thing. I didn't just make that up. Like, that's a part of their whole process. And it pays off because, again, sometimes you call the kid up to face Aaron Judge, and either you're able to do it or you're not. And we're all excited to see that on Tuesday.
We said this before, that you don't want to be in this position. At the time of the draft, Nick Krall said, our goal is to never be in the lottery again. But if they are, they might fall back on a few things. The Reds' previous number 2 picks, 1983, Kurt Stillwell, 2016 and 2017, back-to-back years with the number 2 pick. Nick Senzel in 16, Hunter Green in 17. Obviously, the Green pick looks better than Senzel at this point, but now you pair that with 2024 and Chase Burns. So going back to that draft, non-playoff teams are in the lottery, and then the lottery happens. The Reds maybe haven't had a lot of luck in the past, and that, by definition, the lottery requires some luck. And so they move up in the lottery, but there's a figure, as I said in the tease, that kind of snuck into this story. Bring former Reds first-round pick Devin Mesoraco into this conversation now, Chaz.
Well, this story starts with the draft lottery heading into the 2023 MLB draft. So the Reds lose 100 games in 2022, terrible season. They have the exact same final record, 62 and 100, as the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Reds are entering the lottery in pretty good shape. And there's this kid at the top of the draft named Paul Skeens. The Reds pick first, the Pirates win the first pick, and the Reds fall all the way to 7th. And it wasn't just Skeens. And actually, this came up in the conversation I had with Katuska yesterday. The top 5 of this draft might be like the best top 5 that we've seen in a minute. I mean, it's Paul Skeens, it's Dylan Cruz, who had all the hype and all the moxie, and he's already a notable big leaguer right now. There were 2 high schoolers, Max Clark and Walker Jenkins, who are really top prospects right now. Wyatt Langford was the 4th pick. The Reds loved him. He's a real dude in Texas, a really dynamic young hitter. And then there was a drop off after 5, but this draft was so good that the 6th pick, actually, Jacob Wilson, he's in Sacramento right now, and he's hitting, what's that, 349. That's the 6th pick of the draft, is hitting 349 2 years after he was drafted. So the Reds fell all the way to 7th, and they love Rhett Lauder. They sure would have loved Paul Skeens. So they entered the next year, 2023. What a great season for the Reds. They didn't make the playoffs. They were just in the lottery. And they're thinking, man, after last year's lottery tragedy, almost it felt like, and they love Rhett Lauder, but that's what it was. Falling all the way to 7th. Come on. They bring in a new representative, Devin Mesoraco. Devin makes a plea, he said, to the baseball gods. He told me, and he tweeted at the time, I've had so many injuries over the course of my life, I didn't pan out. Baseball gods, can I please get the, not forgiveness, that's not the right word, but the reward for all of the suffering is basically what he was saying. And Mesoraco is up on the stage, and the Reds move all the way up. Again, they were a team with a winning record. They move all the way up to the number 2 pick. That's how they were able to land Chase Burns. And Mesoraco has a cool perspective, too, because he's also a coach at Pittsburgh in the ACC. So, he's been going up against Chase Burns. Here's Mesoraco talking about Chase Burns, how the Reds landed him, and also giving a bit of advice to Burns heading into his debut.
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly tell he was incredibly talented, right? Like throwing 100. He's got 2 wipe-out breaking balls that are difficult for the catcher to even catch or block. It was just electric stuff. And then you see him out on the mound, and he's an incredible competitor, and seemed like brought a lot of energy to Wake Forest and the things that they were doing down there. So, yeah, it was pretty clear. I mean, if you've ever watched the game, that this kid, has got a ton of talent, and he's going to get every opportunity to be a dude.
I'm sure you were excited when the Reds drafted him. Kind of what was your reaction there?
Yeah, I didn't know exactly what direction the draft was headed. There were some hitters that were there. And I think it came down to hey, if everything clicks for this guy, he's the number 1 starter, right? Like, how many guys are out there 2+ breaking balls and throwing 100 miles an hour? So, I think it was obviously a great pick for the organization as quickly as he's ascended. Hopefully he'll be up there for years to come.
From a catcher's perspective, what are the things you can do to try to help a guy making his big league debut with such limited pro experience?
Just get him to breathe, get him to stay calm. There'll be a lot of emotion. He won't be able to feel his legs on the mound, he'll just be all amped up and fired up. I think that you just get him to breathe, get him to just slow the game down at times. Maybe you got to take an extra visit so that you can just slow him down a little bit. But yeah, if things are going good, keep them moving, keep them going in the right direction, and then just talk to them, be positive, and don't enjoy their day. Enjoy the day, enjoy the moment, and don't make it anything bigger than 60 feet 6 inches and trying to hit the catcher's mitt.
That's former Reds catcher Devin Mesoraco. And it was funny, too, because I asked him at the end, "You going to be watching tomorrow?" And he said, "I've got to." He hasn't followed the Reds super closely since he retired in 2018, but he's following, he's aware. Definitely feels a closer link to Chase Burns because of this whole process. He said that Burns reminds him of Tyler Glass now, but with a reliever's mentality. And that's a pretty good little combination.
It's a great combination, but Devin Mesoraco is invested, man. He's invested in this process. I love, if you knew him as a player, he was serious, he was business, and yeah, he did deal with so many things in his career. So I think the tweet and showing a little bit of personality after the fact and being involved in that process, I think that was really cool to see. Certainly when he said that about, kind of being payback for all the DL time. And you can tell the era in which Devin Mesoraco played, because it was the DL then and not the IL as it is right now. But also, I think you wrote when he was involved in some of that pre-draft discussion, they said he was serious. He wanted to win. It wasn't enjoying the moment being there until after the fact when he saw what happened. So good for Devin Mesoraco. So as we kind of wrap up this conversation, did anything stick out from you because you had the most recent conversation with Chase Burns before the call came. Did you walk away with anything other than the fact that you believe that he could get big league outs now, that as soon as you figured out the news that this was the way the Reds were going to go, you thought right back to, oh, yeah, and I remember when he said this, man, I can't believe that, this is the direction it's going now.
Well, the part of the conversation to me that stands out the most is, and we heard it last time, was when he talks about adjusting to guys using wood bats. Like, this is all still so new to him. Like, I picked up this nugget too over the weekend when he was in Dayton to start the year. His pregame routine, he was throwing. And they're like, all right, let's scale this back a bit. And he, in a very good way, obviously the results have shown that, scaled back his pregame routine. Like, this is the stuff you do in your first year of pro ball, not face Aaron Judge. But that shows, again, how much of a unicorn Chase Burns is. He's got and I think, you heard it from Joe, he certainly got the maturity to be here. And it's an exciting moment for the Reds. I'm excited to watch him. The Reds did a very strong job with this number 2 pick in last year's draft.
And let's just take a moment to all be thankful that Aaron Judge doesn't use an aluminum bat.
It's true. It's a great point.
I mean, come on. Crazy. But yeah, it's going to be a big week at the ballpark. You start with this series. It was going to be, the Yankees bring buzz. The Yankees are the brand. The Yankees have history. It was already going to be that kind of a challenge for the Reds. But you mix this in, Chase Burns in, and there's a different level of interest and excitement in Cincinnati and I think around baseball for this series now, given this news for the Reds, and they hope that it propels them forward in some way. Who knows where this might go with Chase Burns. How many times are we going to do that? There's so many chases.
Even worse, I told you I went to Dayton over the weekend. Dayton has Connor Burns, who's their catcher.
It's going to be it's complicated. For those of us who talk,
real talk.
Go ahead.
Chase Burns needs a nickname. He needs a nickname.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't have it.
Agree.
I don't have it at the top of my head, but he seems like that type of guy.
Maybe that's going to start on Tuesday, but that's outstanding stuff. All right, Chaz, summer's the time to get things done, and the number one thing you have to take care of, as you're getting your business done, is you got to take care of your car. And we've got the place for you. I know you know this. It's Ken Spen Automotive, a full-service automotive repair shop in Cincinnati, Mount Carmel, right off 32. You can take it there for anything, Chaz. You get the cheapest and most thorough oil change and inspection deal in town. That's starting at $35. You're not going to find that anywhere else. They're also a licensed Continental Tire dealer. So, Chaz, just as we say to share with friends within the Power Stacks community about the show, we're sharing with the community about the place to get your car taken care of, and that's Ken Spen Automotive.
And what is it, Mackenzie and Spencer, right? Ken Spen. I'm still a big fan of how they came up with that name.
Yep, Kenzie and Spencer are the children of Paul Brown. It's his shop. And so the shop is called Ken Spen Automotive. You can call Paul. The number is 513-470-8110, or you can schedule and do an appointment online, kenspenautomotive.com, KENZSPEN automotive.com. Whatever you do, stop by the shop, 529 Old State Route 74. Whatever you do, get out and see those folks at Ken Spen Automotive and tell them you heard about it on Power Stacks. They are friends of the show, loyal listeners, and we thank them for their support. All right, time now for Tito's Take. And Chaz, let's go back to the weekend in St. Louis. With Wade Miley out and the Saturday game being his scheduled start, as the Reds decided to go with the bullpen game. It's worked multiple times before already this season. There was no surprise that Brent Suter would be the first person out of the bullpen to start that game as the opener. He's done that twice before already to great success. Where the curveball came, no pun intended, was the Reds had Chase Petty in the bullpen was there a starter who could cover bulk innings if he needed to. But instead of Chase Petty coming out of the bullpen, it was a combination of other arms that included current starter Nick Martinez. Take me behind the curtain into the head of manager Terry Francona and pitching coach Derek Johnson about how they arrived at this and what it means.
As the game went on, I kind of figured out that Chase Burns was going to be coming up on Tuesday because this is how it played out. So Nick Martinez. So let's actually start with Brent Suter because of how much he had pitched on Thursday. You probably weren't expecting him to go 3 this time around. All right, now you've got Nick Martinez going 2. He had only pitched, I believe, like 2 1/3, 2 2/3 on Tuesday. He had a lot of, his arm was still pretty fresh. He had the opportunity to use him. Now the conventional move would have been just use Chase Petty as your bulk guy or even your starting pitcher. But the fact that they used Martinez and then used him for 2, to me, showed that they didn't want him then going back out on Tuesday on such short rest, coming off short rest. So then you kind of keep waiting for them to use Chase Petty, just like they did in late May. They delay that until the 11th. Then when they throw him in the 11th, there's no way they're going to have a 22-year-old go back-to-back. So they send him down. My first impression when they put Petty on the taxi squad was that he was going to get the chance to show what he could do as a starter or in a spot start. Because I wasn't expecting Martinez to be available yet at that point. And I was kind of curious to see Petty get another shot. Like he hasn't been as good as Burns, but he's had some solid moments in AAA. Again, I'm going to say this again. I really would have been curious to see Petty get a shot. But instead, you kind of lost the day with him. It would have been much more manageable, let's say, to have Petty be the guy who pitched those 2 innings in like the 3rd and 4th, and then say Martinez in case you need him for an emergency in extra innings, which is the Petty situation. It wasn't a fair spot Petty got dropped into. It kind of interrupts the routine he's on. Again, like, why not just maybe give Petty a shot to see what he can do as a starter before then you turn your rotation over to Burns, with who we believe in completely, but does have such limited pro ball experience. Like the Chase Petty of it all, why was it Petty and not just, bring up Yasser Zulueta a day early, who knows how to come out of the bullpen and has done that before. Like how that was handled was very different for me. It's very aggressive on Terry Francona's part, doing everything he could to win that game. But it was a missed opportunity to see what you had in Petty, who now goes back to AAA and will try to kind of get back on track as a starter.
My takeaway was exactly that. It was aggressive. I think it showed the mindset of how Francona and the Reds viewed that game, that Martinez became part of the equation in doing everything they could to win that series. And that game was a gut punch, but it also should be pointed out that even in the position that Petty was in, when he came in extras, I think he threw the ball better. I mean, he hit Nolan Arenado, right? But I think he threw the ball better than his previous 2 appearances. And what turned out to be the game-winning hit was a blooper, a short blooper to right field. And before that, I think Emilio Pagan, in discussing, that game, said, look, Chase Petty in that spot, that was pretty good. So I don't think
real quick, this isn't about Petty. It's how they got to that spot.
Right.
So
right.
I'll start on, so everyone got used on Thursday. Friday, Taylor Rogers is struggling right now. You had that Rogers-Barlow inning where neither of them could complete it. Neither of them are throwing strikes. So then when you're down 3, you bring in Santillan. So now Santillan's a little more tired for Saturday. Then you have a complete bullpen game on Saturday where it's kind of all hands on deck. And because you didn't use Petty as the bulk guy, you did need Pagan to go 1+. If Petty, say, throws the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, maybe the game doesn't go the same way for the Reds. Again, very aggressive move by Terry Francona, but it catches up to you at the end of that game when you need to go Santillan for another game after how much he had pitched, when you need to go Pagan 1+, then you get to extras, then you go Petty. It does all add up, starting with the decision of how you used Petty and didn't use Petty in that game.
I agree with you, but Tony Santillan threw 12 pitches the day before. That's not a huge deal. I get that it was hot and that it is up and down and all, but he threw 12 pitches. So I don't think that was too much of a stretch. I agree with you on the rationale of the aggressive move, My only point was, regardless of where Petty pitched, and he's gone now for who knows how long, I think that's continuing to build in a better direction than it was giving up 9 runs in Houston right away, right out of the gate for Chase Petty. One of the other stories in St. Louis that any of us could see coming was Matt McLain continued to hit, and as a result, now the top of the order looks a lot more like it did when the Reds were at their best, when De La Cruz and McLain hit back-to-back and were at their best, and now you mix into that your all-star caliber leadoff guy in TJ Friedl. How different does the top of the lineup look if this holds specifically with those 3 players?
Well, you've heard me tell the story all season about how these in-game decision-making management processes from opposing managers is they wake up in the morning and they think, how can we get as many lefties to face TJ Friedl and Ellie De La Cruz as possible?
Right.
The whole everything changes when you have a right-handed hitter hitting second who makes teams pay. That's what McLain, it's funny too, like what this lineup was supposed to be wasn't TJ1, LE3, build around that. It was Matt 2, LE3, build around. That was supposed to be the inner circle of the lineup, and to have Matt hitting the ball the other way, looking a lot more comfortable with his lower half, doing better against the outside pitch, looking more confident in 2-strike counts. We all know what Matt's ceiling is, and the closer he gets to that, changes how this Reds team feels, and you're starting to see that take off, and that's as encouraging of a sign as it gets for the Reds.
Reds also added Rece Hinds. Hinds has been on a little bit of a heater at AAA. That's always intriguing when someone with his ability to make hard contact is consistently making hard contact. You have any feel? Certainly there were some left-handers on the horizon that the Reds will face, but here's Rece Hinds again.
Yeah, the lefties are definitely what I think sparked this move, combined with the hot streak. What Hinds needs to continue to show progress with is defensively. And I'm very curious to see how they'll use him there, whether it is just a DH role, whether or not they'll give him more opportunities in the outfield to see what he can do. Right now, looking at their lineup against left-handed pitching, it's either if you just have one catcher in there, Trevino's off or whatever, then you have Gavin Lux has been in there facing left-handers. Or if Trevino is in there and you have Stevenson at DH, then you still have Connor Joe in there. What I am interested to see is, are there situations where they would prefer Joe's at-bat polish, or coming off the bench when a left-handed reliever comes in, prefer his at-bat polish, which sure, roll your eyes at Connor Joe. He's had some big at-bats over the last couple of days off the bench where he's seeing the ball very well, combined to Rece, who can hit the ball out of the park with the blink of an eye, but that's not as much his game. Balancing those two guys late in games will be interesting to me. Against lefties, I would expect to see a lot more Rece. But again, very curious to see how he looks defensively after working on some stuff in AAA. That'll be a big deal for him. But the Reds need more against left-handed pitching. Again, say what you want about this. I think Jeimer Candelario coming back might help a bit there as well. Like, he was about average against left-handed pitching with bad batted ball luck against left-handed pitching, and then was pathetic against right-handed pitching. But the ability to have that together, it doesn't hurt, is what I'm trying to say. Hinds, Candelario, they didn't have enough options against lefties. That's why you saw Garrett Hampson out there. Now they do have more options. None of them are great, but a lot more of them you can talk yourself into being closer to average, which could help the Reds against left-handed pitching.
Let's get into Charlie's notebook here just a little bit. And there are certain things that we hear and we see from time to time in the clubhouse, pregame, postgame, and it was hard to ignore at one point how many players I talked to, and you're in these conversations, that kept using the same phrase, the same wording in different answers that they had describing this team and what they're doing right now. And you keep hearing this top step mentality. Top step. We're on the top step. We have a top step mentality. We're doing that. It was everybody saying this. And it's both a literal and kind of a metaphorical observation for how this team wants to play and how they want to be in game, the energy they want to create, the the energy they want to project from the dugout. So the top step is obviously a reference to being on the top step of the dugout, not sitting back on the bench in the dugout. If you're on the top step, if you're on the rail, you're closer to the field, you're engaged in the game. It's also a visual when those of us in the television broadcast take that shot of the dugout and everybody's on the rail and a guy makes a play and you're beating on the rail. That's who the Reds have been, and that's very much vocally how they want to describe themselves and what they're trying to do. So here's a take from a couple of guys. It's Nick Lodolo. It's Nick Martinez. It's Spencer Steer in that order on the Reds' top step mentality.
It's just pulling for the guy in the box, We're not sitting there. We're not on iPads or anything like that. Everyone's watching the game, and, we're there for the guy in the box, pulling for him. And, if he gets it done, great. And we'll move it on to the next guy. And if he doesn't, same thing, we're going to pass to the next guy and hope he gets it done. So, like I said, not one guy trying to be a hero. It's just playing team ball.
It's the difference maker in those tight ball games, those close ball games, and those that third game, right? We it's no secret that we were struggling on those rubber matches, and I think it comes down to everyone being invested and then pulling for our guys.
Yeah, it's contagious, and when you're in the box and you hear the dugout, yelling for you, and after a good take and they're yelling from the dugout, you kind of feel that, and makes you want to get the job done even more. So I think that's a big part of I think what we've done well lately is bring that energy in the dugout, and I think that's kind of trickled down into our play.
Look, you don't want to manufacture emotion. That's not the way it works, especially over a long season, the way baseball is. But you want to have an expectation of here's what we're not going to be. We're not going to sit back on the bench. We're not going to present ourselves that way. Here's what we're going to be. And then what happens after that needs to be real. The Reds feel like they have some of that right now with this top step mentality.
My favorite part of this story is, all right, Jose Trevino was a big part of the messaging, the conversation. No surprise there. We all know Jose has been a great leader on this team. Another guy who was vocal, kind of behind the scenes about this and made some good points, talking to guys about it, was Gavin Lux, who was the young guy in LA and now was one of the older guys in Cincinnati. And I think now you're starting.
What do those two players have in common? Those two players, Gavin Lux and Jose Trevino, have what in common?
Well, they played in the World Series last year. They come from these teams where that's the expectation. And they've been talking about that. And then I'll say it again with Lux, like embracing the different position that he's in this clubhouse. Because he was the young, not the talent level of Ellie De La Cruz quite, but like he was the young kid, the Ellie De La Cruz around the adults of Freddie Freeman and Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts and Will Smith and Max Muncy. Here he's Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, Mookie Betts, just when you look at it in terms of clubhouse stature, and he's living up to that.
I want to remind you there is a new X handle at Power Stacks Pod. Check it out there. We each have our own X content where you'll find all the Power Stack stuff, but we want to centralize it as well. So go to Power Stacks Pod on X, and we'll try to keep that stocked with all the content, all the links, all the shows. Please do that. The email address is powerstackspod@gmail.com, powerstackspod@gmail.com. Like the good folks at Ken Spen Automotive, if you want to do something creative with us and partner with us, we're happy to partner with you. Reach out at that email address, and we'll get back quickly and put something together. So, Chaz, we look ahead now to, like I said, what is a huge week, what feels like a huge week, not only at the ballpark, but in Cincinnati. You've got the Yankees up first. In the middle, there's an off day, but there's also that off day and leading into the Padres next, the 50-year reunion of the Big Red Machine. So everything that's going on with this edition of Cincinnati Reds is huge and at the forefront, but lurking under the surface, what happens in Cincinnati and at Great American Ballpark when you start to bring out some of the greats from the past, and they're all going to be there from the Big Red Machine this week.
I really, like you saw it in the Tigers series. I've called them everyone gets a game ball games. Like there is something to that. There is something propelling about that. The Reds have that opportunity this week in both of these series, especially when you look at the opportunity for a moment like Chase Burns against the Yankees. Like this is going to be one of the more exciting weeks of the season. I think this will be one of the weeks that we look back on at the end of the season, either because of the opportunity seized or the opportunity not taken advantage of.
I agree with that. Great work on the Chase Burns story. If you're listening to this, when it's before Tuesday, go back and listen to the previous show when Chaz sat down with Chase Burns on the X handle at Power Stacks Pod. We've got it queued up for you. You can click one link. It goes right to the Chase Burns conversation with Chaz. And that's a great way to start this week to set the table for all this that's happening at Great American Ballpark this week. So great work on that. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks to producer Kent in the Lone Star State for making it all happen. And we'll see you next time. There'll be a lot to talk about on the next edition of Power Stacks with Giesenslaw and Goldsmith.